Hey everybody, this is me, the Undead Viking. You can't really see me. You actually can see my painting station that I use to paint my Warhammer 40k models. You know, I've actually been meaning to do Warhammer and, well, I shouldn't say Warhammer 40k because these are Age of Sigmar models. But I have been meaning to do Warhammer videos. I mean, there's a ton of people out there that do them, so I would feel kind of like I'm just piling on. But I would have like kind of the neat viewpoint, in my opinion, of being the guy that talks about Warhammer and Age of Sigmar and 40k being relatively really new to the hobby. And so I might still do that. I'm not quite positive sure if I will or if I won't. It definitely is a matter of time and whether or not like the mood strikes me or whatever. But I actually just did a couple of RPG videos and I got some really good feedback on those. And this is something that I've wanted to do for a while. And the reason I'm just not talking into the camera is, you know, you don't really need me to see me, I guess, is the way for me to tell this story. You can just kind of have this on in the background. If you want to watch me paint my my ghouls here for my Flesh Eater Quartz army, you definitely can. This is going to be a pretty boring. I've already base painted these, and now I'm in the process of like I've got the Abaddon Black or Chaos Black primer on there, and so now I'm starting to get their gray skin with Mechanicus Standard Gray, if that matters to you at all. But this is basically kind of a dark gray, and then what I can do then is I'm going to be able to kind of drench their body in some in a wash, maybe a little Druchii Violet to give it some like red tinge or whatever, and then I can just dry brush these. These will be one of the battle lines for my Flesh Eater Quartz army, so they don't really need to be super awesome detailed or whatever like that. They aren't going to be my generals or my crypt horrors or anything like that. So I'm kind of taking the quick and dirty approach to these. Otherwise my armies will never get done. So now the reason why, now you're saying, well, I thought this was supposed to be about an RPG video. Yes, it is. This is about my last D&D campaign that I ran. A while ago I did a video, you know, while I'm talking, I might as well do this. A while ago, I did a video that was talking about how to run campaigns. I don't even remember what the focus was, but it was an RPG video, and I talked about like running your own RPG campaign and whatever, and I was talking about the fact that I had mine going on, and I was in the process of like, you know, the campaign had been running for about 2 years, and it was kind of getting close to drawing to a close. And my thing was that I had kind of reached a point where I wanted to talk about the ideas that I'd had about the campaign that I did, and also just like, you know, what I thought worked and what I thought didn't, and also just talk about the plot and some of the things that like happened with the campaign that I maybe hadn't planned on, but like maybe were happy accidents, or maybe like the players went in a direction that I, you know, hadn't ever planned on them doing, as PCs tend to do, because you're dealing with human beings and not like strict mechanisms and everything like that. And so players will tend to you know, like go down paths that you're not really planning on them to go on, and which is fine. You know, that's like one of the great things about D&D is that there was a cartoon fairly recently where like it showed basically like this DM losing his mind because he had like this carefully created plot point, as he was pointing to, like basically like this, if this miniature here was the plot point, and like he had placed it, you know, right there for the players to look at and focus on. And But instead, the players decided that this little random NPC over here was much more important than the plot point, and they were spending hours, dealing with this person. And so, and that can be very frustrating as a GM, because or a DM or whatever you want to call it. It can be very frustrating because you spend a lot of time trying to create that. But sometimes letting the players branch off and do their own thing and kind of make the world their own is a very good way to have really good memories and really good stories and whatever. So yes, it can be frustrating, but it's also one of those things where I think you kind of have to welcome it and keep an open mind about it as a DM. But anyway, so this is going to be kind of a longer video, so I do apologize. I mean, this is probably something you'd want to maybe listen to while you're at work or on a drive or whatever. So, but bear with me. Hopefully, I'll get through everything. I had an idea for a campaign. This is many years ago. I'm guessing it was 5 or 6 years ago, and I had this idea for a campaign where that there was this idea that there was this horrible cataclysm coming. This is in the before times, before the players were adventurers or anything like that. And so, as when that happened, what happened is that the cataclysm was coming or whatever, and the king had called out for heroes to come and fix things, and so this one hero had answered the call and had brought with him his troop of adventurers, and so they had gone off to find the evil or whatever that was causing the cataclysm, because nobody exactly knew what it was. And there were firestorms and earthquakes and typhoons and whatever you can think of, that the end times are upon us type of situation. And what happened is that one day all the end time things were done. And so they thought, oh, well, the heroes had succeeded, right? Because, there wasn't any earthquakes anymore. There weren't, water spouts and explosions happening. There weren't rampant evil creatures running through the forests and whatever. And so they all waited for the heroes to return, to a triumphant return. Because obviously they had gone off, they had found whatever was causing it, and they had finished it off. But in the days and months and years that passed, they never returned. So, the idea is that, oh, well, they must have died saving the world. And so they are all commemorated as heroes. Now, mind you, this is 2 campaigns ago that I ran. So and so I had that idea, and that idea kind of stemmed from the idea of, what if there was a group of adventurers that, when they went to go find the big evil was just whatever. Insert big evil here. But the big evil had to be some sort of a demon or a devil or whatever. And as is wont to do in campaigns, the big evil always offers, it's join me, and together we will rule the nation, and you will be my lieutenants, and, it's you can save, otherwise I'm just going to defeat you and I'll destroy the world, right? So what if, this is the idea I had, what if they took him up on the offer? What if, somebody in the party said, he's going to kill us anyway, at least this way, maybe we'd be able to save somebody, and we'd save our lives. And so that was the premise of my idea, was that the heroes hadn't actually stopped anything. What they had done is they had just, the devil or the demon or whatever otherworld planar creature had taken them up on the offer, and they had all gone into hiding and vanished for a while. And so that was my idea. And so then the players, and I'm not going to talk too much about this campaign because I don't want to go too far, but that idea, that premise of what if the heroes at the last moment chose to save their own skin, instead of yes, you're supposed to be heroes and you're supposed to do the right thing and die trying, the Captain America way or whatever. You're supposed to, do it. But what if they didn't? And so that kind of stuck with me, that idea. And the other thing I dragged out of that adventure, which I thought worked really well, which now actually wouldn't work really well for me at all because of the fact that I'm not doing the system we work on now no longer has alignments, which I want to talk about that at some point. Why I think you don't need to have alignments in D&D, and I'm going to talk about that in an upcoming video. But anyway, but at the time we had alignments, and I had come up with an idea of like a very generic god for each alignment, each of the 9 alignments, and I thought that was pretty. I don't know if clever is the word that I'd use, but I thought that worked really well, and it's so. It was just like, lawful good was just the crusader, lawful neutral was the judge, lawful evil was the tyrant, and then neutral good was the healer, and then it was the fates for neutral, neutral evil was the assassin, and then it was for chaotic good it was the hero, chaotic good was the hero, chaotic neutral was the beast, and chaotic evil was the destroyer. And so that was like kind of like the idea that I ran with, was that like, okay, so then, because it just made it easier, like I didn't have to remember, I am Nefertefetur, the god of trickery, and I am Zim Zam Zoom, the god of magic, or whatever. I just, I kind of liked how it was just simple and straightforward, and there wasn't a lot of monkey shines and having to remember a lot of stuff. But anyway, so that campaign ended. It was actually pretty good. There was a couple of things that I really liked. At one point, because like basically what happened was then the other heroes basically became like they pretended to be like still the heroes they were, even though they had been corrupted totally, and they were convincing people to worship them. But in fact, what they were doing is they were worshiping the demon or the devil or whatever. And so that was the whole point, was that he was going to use those heroes to garner, like, people praying to them and gaining power. And so that was what they had to rebel against. But anyway, that campaign ended, and it had the big final showdown where they had to defeat all of the new gods or whatever. There was a really good moment where basically the one of the characters actually was considered to be like the prophet, not to be blasphemous or anything like that, but he kind of became in the and it wasn't like I had planned this. It was just one of those things where it had slowly kind of morphed into it. But he was considered to be kind of like Jesus Christ in a weird way. I mean, I'm not trying to be blasphemous or anything like that, but it was he was considered to be the messenger of the gods kind of thing. And so it definitely did add a lot to the campaign as far as the humor of the situation, and a lot of moments where they had to hide him because of either being people wanting to kill him or the people wanting to worship him. It was just a fun little aspect of the campaign. Anyway, so, and maybe I'll talk about that one at some time, but that was a long time ago, and my memory of that is kind of is fading. I always say I should write these things down, and I do write down. I have tons of campaign notes, but they're all disjointed and all over the place, so it's kind of tough to remember exactly what I was thinking and everything like that. Something about me when I DM, I am really open as a DM. I don't have structure so much. I mean, I have a general idea of where the plot's going to take me and what's going to happen and who the major players are, as far as the different as far as the different power brokers, if you will, the power players of the campaign. But I don't, and I have an idea of what they should be doing and where they're going. But as far as being really, really structured, as far as okay, I need to write down every single person and every single spot and every single thing, it's no. I keep a copy of. There was a fantastic book for 3.0, I believe it was the Kingdoms of Calamar book which basically detailed hundreds of cities in it, and in those hundreds of cities, it also had thousands of PC names in there of like different, like, oh, in this city there's a wizard and his name is Muffinavadus, you know, and then like, oh, okay, perfect. You know, I needed a name for a guy. I'd open up that book and I'd find a name within a heartbeat. And like, and it was, so it was like Kingdoms of Calamar. It was like a source book or something like that. I still have it somewhere. But anyway, regardless. So from that idea of that campaign, what I did was I had this idea of, okay, so I want to somehow put the players in that position. I want to make the players make a decision as far as at like kind of the penultimate end of the campaign. They're going to need to decide exactly whose side they're on. And maybe, could I possibly put them in a spot where they would, you know, give up on literally the year or so or more of playing and switch sides at the very end if I could convince them it was for the greater good. So okay, so then go to, now this is like, I'm always, so like right now, like my buddy Jason's running a campaign. So right now I am constantly thinking about my next campaign. I am always like, it's like what I think about as I'm going to bed. Honestly, it's like, it's one of the ways I fall asleep is I just lay in bed and I think about, all right, you know, so what is my next campaign going to be about? And I've got a lot of ideas for my next campaign. I've been bouncing them around and like, you know, I've been reading a lot of books and like kind of getting ideas and whatever. But I'm not here to talk about that. But I went, so I was like, and then the campaign after that was run, I believe it was run by my buddy Craig. I forget. It was either Craig or Andy. I don't remember. But then I got the next one. It was Andy. It was my buddy Andy. But anyway, so we were sitting there, and I had this idea, and I sat there, and while I was playing in Andy's campaign, I was just creating this campaign. And so I lifted my thing as far as the gods. So I took those 9 gods and of the 9 different alignments or whatever, and I was like, I got to come up with an idea. As far as, you know, sides. And so one of the things about the campaign that I did, the last one, was it got too fantastic for me. I was kind of in the mood to run something more gritty. I was kind of in the mood to run something that was a little more austere as far as like not too like the combat. I didn't want combat to be just like fireballs flying left and right, and I didn't want everybody to have sword +4s and things like that. I wanted to be kind of more survival based and more basic. Now, as the game progressed, we got away from that. But at the very beginning, I was like, I love the idea of exploring an unknown continent. And so I came up with this idea of this world that basically there were these two countries, the country of Tresk and the country of Astandar. And there was a large body of water called the Endless Sea that separated the two of them. And so I came up with this idea that basically stated that at one point they had been at war, and in order for the war to end, what they did was they fostered a marriage, you know, like just a political marriage. So between like oh God, I'm gonna forget the exact. I mean, why should I worry about if I'm not getting it exactly correct? But basically, they forged this marriage and they united the two kingdoms. So the problem was that eventually, after, you know, and there was peace for a long time. And so what happened though is that the king in Tresk became convinced, like he slowly went crazy, and nobody knows exactly why or anything like that, but he was like slowly going crazy, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that like his oldest son like died of an illness, and this is like stuff that happened long before the PCs are on the scene. So he died of an illness, and they didn't know exactly what happened or anything like that. They didn't have any evidence, and then after like that son died, like another one like got the same illness and like almost died. like literally like came, you know, with very close to being dead, but they managed to save his life, but he became kind of a like the between like whatever the actions, the magical actions that they did, kind of blasted his mind, and so like he didn't have like the like he was a simpleton kind of thing. So they kind of had to send him away to the country to live and whatever. And so then the final son was like his last hope. He had 3 sons. I should have said that. But anyway, he had 3 sons, and his final son was the last one. But he became convinced that somebody was trying to assassinate his bloodline, and that's what this disease. And then so he became so crazy that he started like imprisoning people and torturing them, and like trying to find out who was trying to assassinate his bloodline. And so he eventually captured some, like, you know, apothecary or whatever, like, you know, some cleric of the assassin or something. And in an effort to save his skin, the cleric, this evil cleric, said that it was actually the king of Astandar that was killing his children. So okay, but the guy was lying. But that seemed to satisfy the king, and he was like, oh, okay, well, these people betrayed me. Now, ultimately, what happened is that there was, like, there were Astandarians that were living in Tresk at the time, so he had them all rounded up and basically put to the sword, including, like, the contingent of the army that was there. Astengar got wind of what was going on, and so they sent their navy across the Endless Sea. There was a huge battle. The Astandarian navy was defeated, and then so the king sent his army. The Trescan king sent his army and his navy across the sea. They attacked. They won, and he had like in front of everybody, he had the king of Astandar brought before him and had him executed on the beaches. Just like had his head lopped off or whatever. And then he swore that he in his benevolence, he said that it wasn't like the Astandarians' fault, that this horrible thing had happened. But the kingdom of Astandar was no more. He said the bloodline has been severed. And the Astandar is now part of Tresk, and then he said, you are welcome to stay here, or you can come to Tresk or whatever, and blah 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 blah. Who cares? So, well, the first thing is that the king had no intention of doing anything to help to help Astandar in any way, and so because they had basically destroyed all their army, the evil things that live in the forests and whatever kind of realized that the people didn't have a lot of protection, and so they started evil humanoids, orcs, goblins, trolls, giants, and things much worse started getting wind of the fact that basically there was easy prey, if you will, and so they Astandar started to become more and more wild and corrupted and destroyed, until finally, like, the Astandarians that were still alive, and then basically went to cross the Endless Sea if they could, or ended up being killed, and went and moved to Tresk. All right, so fast forward a little bit. So the Mad King, his youngest son's still alive, and he gets crazier and crazier and crazier until one day they find that because like if I remember correctly, like the one person that kept him like kind of in check was his mom, and his mom was still alive, well into her 80s or whatever, and but his mom passes away, and then he locks himself in his room, in her room, with her body, and like the next, he doesn't come out for like 2 days, and they finally break down the door, and they find him that it looks like he slit his own throat and killed himself. So his son, who's like 16, takes over, and like kind of says, oh, it's like my father did some pretty bad things, and because he was like super paranoid and whatever, but now we're turning over a new leaf, and he's going to try to be a good king, and this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things he said was, we're going to go and we're going to find out what's going on over at Astandar, and we're gonna, reclaim the land. And so he sent like a group of adventurers, and this is once again before the party. He sends a group of adventurers there, and they come back, and like the scouts say, oh, it's just overrun, with monsters or whatever. It's just like crazy. And so so he sends these three paladins, like the warriors, these three powerful the warriors three, kind of like from the Thor comics. It's just basically a paladin of the Crusader, a paladin of the Judge, and a paladin of the Healer, which are the only three gods you can be paladins of. So he sends them and their army over, and they do battle with all these beasties and undead and whatever and demons and who knows what else, and they retake the castle throne, it's called the Citadel, and they retake the Citadel, which is basically like this giant rock carved out of. It sits in this bay, and it's like a castle basically carved into a rock, and so they reclaim it. And so then the king, this boy, he sends his uncle, by a guy by the name of Vladimir, and he sends his uncle to basically be the king of Astandar. He's not a king, it's Baron Vladimir, so he's kind of like the person that holds the throne or whatever. Not that they're not going to like reestablish the Astandarian bloodline because it doesn't exist anymore, but he sends him over, and he's going to oversee the reclaiming of the Astandarian lands. So now this is where the adventurers come in. That's a lot of story, right? And we're not even to where the adventurers come in. So the adventurers come in when basically what happens is that Baron Vladimir and the king put a claim out to adventurers that say that come to New Astandar is what they're calling it. Come to New Astandar, stake your claim, carve out a portion of the land, free it from the evil, and you could become 1, rich, 2, famous, and 3, if you're successful enough, you could become a noble and basically start your own bloodline and have be part of like I'm saying aristocracy, but you know what I mean. Basically they basically make a little bit better for themselves, if you will, as far as being able to be a duke or just a noble. So anyway, you get from it. So that's where the players come in. All right, so the people playing the campaign were my pretty much my standard group. There was Craig. Craig was playing Ulthus, the Dwarven Warrior. That's Craig normally plays dwarves. It's just what he does. He occasionally plays other races, but mostly he plays dwarves. Andy, who played a human mage named Jondon. My friend Paul, who played Rolandus, an elven rogue or thief. We call them thieves in our system. Rogue romanticizes them a little bit, in our opinion. But he played named Rolandus. And, oh man, I can't remember Joel's character now. My buddy Joel played... he played a dwarven cleric of the Judge, and I can't remember his name, Thrak or something like that. I don't know, I forget what it is, but yeah, he played a dwarven priest. So they had their bases covered. They had their fighter, they had their mage, they had their cleric, they had their thief. They had the bases covered as far as the different roles and whatever that they needed, which is always good. So they make it across the Endless Sea, and so it's kind of like a plot device, and one that we didn't really revisit a lot later, but to come up with an excuse for them to meet Baron Vladimir and kind of get the lay of the land, I came up with a backstory that said that Craig, Ulthus's uncle, was a dwarven is a dwarven commander back in Tresk, a dwarven army or whatever. And one of the reasons why Vladimir has been like kind of sent to go do this duty is because during one of the wars, like he didn't do well. He didn't, and maybe it was his own buffoonery or whatever. But he ended up, this mission that's been given to him, while might seem like, oh, you get to be the new, like, king, basically, or the regent, for the area. It's totally like unclaimed country, full of all kinds of things that want to kill and eat you. So it is not, so to speak, a plum assignment, if you will. So he is kind of annoyed, and he kind of blames Ulthus's uncle because, like, he had put forth a call for aid and had not, and then his uncle had not come to save him or whatever. And so, like, and it was, admittedly, it was a bit of a kind of a screw job, a little bit, but it wasn't like he was super mad or anything like that. He just kind of wanted to get a feel for Ulthus and, like, basically, kind of flex his muscles and kind of be a jerk for a little bit. But what it did was it allowed the players to meet him. They got to meet the Warriors 3, the 3 Paladins. Which were, if I remember correctly, there was Justin Brand, like Gregory Grum, I believe. He was a dwarf paladin of the healer, if I remember correctly, and then there was the lawful good one of the Crusader. He was like Johannes or something like that. I can't remember the names to save my life. I don't have my notes in front of me, but it doesn't matter. Just they were like they're 3 paladins, like, just ultimately, like, good, wonderful people, and then they got to meet also Baron Vladimir's wife, Lady Sarah, who was kind of vacuous but very, very, very beautiful and very, very young, and so, like, the players kind of just disregarded her. Oh, you know what? I totally forgot. My buddy Jason actually played. My buddy Jason always makes really cool characters, and his character was a gnomish bishop. Now, okay, so that's going to take a little bit of explanation. So our system that we run is a homebrew system, and we have a few character classes that we've created and we've used, and one of them is like a blade master, like your standard like guy or gal, I should say, that focuses on one weapon and uses that one weapon constantly. That's one of the things we have. And then the other thing we have is the bishop. And the bishop is, if you played the old Wizardry computer game, the bishop it was basically someone who could use both magic user spells and cleric spells. So it was kind of like a multi-class character, but it's by itself. They also had a lot of identification abilities. So they could identify potions and things like that just by smelling them or seeing them or whatever. Anyway, so he had a gnome bishop of the healer by the name of Toggle. And Toggle was a great character. But anyway, so there you go. That's the party. So I can't believe I forgot about Toggle. Toggle was like, he was like 3 feet tall, or no, he was like 2.5 feet tall or something like that. Basically like this like little tiny kid, this gnome, and he had this giant backpack that he carried with him wherever he went. That he just, anything that he found that was interesting, he would put in the backpack and carry it around. Now, I don't want to spend too much time telling actual like stories about different adventures they went on or things like that. I might actually do, because as with any campaign, you eventually, like, you have these wonderful moments during the campaign. Like, there's just great stories about like different dungeons or different like encounters that were throwaway encounters. But because of certain things that happen or actions, they become like bigger and better and more huge. I mean, like, for example, an AD&D game campaign. Okay, this is going to take another background story here real quick. So one of the things that we have always used I mean we've always used, is we've always used a critical hit table. And it's a critical hit table that we've created our own. Actually, I should give credit to Craig makes the critical hit table. And there's a critical miss table as well. And so basically, so if you roll a d20, you get to roll in the critical hit table. Now, we've changed that up slightly, just because the idea that like, like if it's like a, giant dragon, or like a 90-foot tall dragon and a peasant like throws a spear at it and rolls a 20 and then manages to roll, shot through both eyes, dead immediately. We thought that was kind of silly. That shouldn't happen. I mean, technically it can happen, in the game. But what we've done is that like if you roll a 20, kind of like the threat system, it's like, oh, it's a threat, and then you roll to see if it was like if you completed the threat back with like Pathfinder and 3.5 and whatever. So if you rolled a 20, sometimes it would be a critical hit. It would just be like, oh, if you had enough high enough level, basically it went off your 2-hit roll. So like if you rolled a 20, but you normally would have hit the thing on like a 12 anyway, it was just a critical hit. You just get the critical hit table out, and you'd roll it, and then you'd go with it. If it was anything else, like you'd have to roll again to confirm it, and like there was a table to confirm it, and critical hits didn't happen that often, so it wasn't really bothersome to go ahead and dig it out or anything like that. So and then the critical hit table itself was numbers from minus 99 to 200, and so when you roll. Like, if it was a crushing weapon, you just roll D percentile, and that's what you get. If it was an impaling weapon, you'd roll D percentile, and then you'd minus D percentile. So, like, if you rolled, like, a 10, and then you rolled a 20, you'd have a minus 10 on the table. And then for slashing weapons, you'd do D percentage plus D percentage. Now, as you can probably guess, the more extreme negative you went, better off like you got. Now, there were some situations where if you got a 0, because getting a 0 would be tough, basically because you have to roll the same number twice. You'd have to roll D percentage of 20 and then roll D percentage of 20 again, and then you'd have a 0. So 0 was kind of a big deal. I think it was an instant kill on the table if I had to remember correctly. But so there's stuff like that. There were outliers like that. But anyway, so the reason I'm telling you about this is that I remember, perfect example, playing D&D, I think we were in our early 20s, and the party was, moving down a valley, and the ranger, Craig's ranger, was leading the way. And what he didn't know is that there was a troop of mountain giants that were watching them. And so, he hadn't seen them yet. The ranger, blew his... I don't think there even was perception checks back then, because I think we were playing, 2nd edition D&D. But, so he didn't see the giants, and so this giant, heaves a boulder on him. And so... and then it was we rolled the critical hit, and it was 5 times damage. And this thing did 3 to 30 points of damage with his rocks. So, it was one of those things where it's okay, I'm going to roll, 15 D10 damage. And it was some absurd amount of damage. And so the idea is that this poor ranger was basically standing there like this. And, I may have to show it this in the camera, but basically the rock just came into it, crump, and and then this crushed him, and the rock didn't even move. He was just obliterated. But anyway, so that, little offshoot stories about D&D. Those are the things you remember and you repeat, time and time again, as you're playing, and you kind of remember those fondly. But all right, so now the point is that I will probably maybe tell a few stories here and there. There was the Slime House adventure, which was a great moment. There was the time when they ran into these sprigs that were and sprigs are these weird fey creatures, and that was a rather amusing encounter. Another one was right away, like and like one of the early levels or whatever of the when we were playing, was that they I was rolling on this like random, it was like an old, it was some, like master like encounter table kind of thing, right? And I think it was like a DM toolbox, if you remember that thing. I think AEG put the back. Remember when AEG did like tons of different like RPG things, if you remember correctly. I mean, I remember that. If I believe I'm remembering correctly. But anyway, so it was like the DM toolbox. And in the DM toolbox, there were like encounter tables, like wandering encounter tables. And so I was using those just because I thought those worked really well. Because remember, once the players get to the Citadel, there's like nothing going on, right? If as soon as they leave the Citadel, they are basically taking their lives into their hands and just seeing what's going on. And so the players will like, wander off into the wilderness and see what happens. And that was what they were doing. And so, and there were like I gave them rumors. I actually worked hard and like came up with like a rumor table, which is something that I really enjoyed doing. I asked my wife to come up with like some random ones, like, so like it was just so like they wouldn't be like standard like tropes or whatever. And so like, she's like played D&D with, our family plays, but like, she hasn't played it, for decades. So I had her like come up with some, and she came up with like some really cool ones, and I put on there. Some of them actually I turned into like multi-part adventures during the campaign. But so ultimately, what they did was they were wandering around in like the forests near where they were, and I rolled wandering monster check, and they got a wandering monster, and so they rolled on the table, and it was like for low level adventures, and and in a forest, and I rolled a 0-1, and so I looked at the table, and it said green dragon. And I was just like, oh, and I was like, what do I do? Because I think they were like first or second level. And I was just like, all right. So I said, well, how about if I just have like a young green dragon show up and like flies overhead and decides to see if they're an easy meal. And the thing is that, like a young green dragon doesn't have a ton of hit points, but, it has enough. And now, I had to play fast and loose with a few things here, but, I wanted to put it into a situation where, like, basically maybe he would just take a pass and, like, green dragons are lawful evil. They're not, like, like, just hateful jerks or whatever. If he's not going to waste his time or his energy on things that could possibly hurt him. So, he flies overhead, and then and then they see him, and he goes over, and I think I had him breathe on him once, and the breath weapon was like 2d8 damage or something like that. Some of them saved, some of them didn't. So they scatter, and so he lands in front of Ulthus, and he takes a swipe at him and misses, and Ulthus attacks him and gets a critical hit on him. Now I was like, holy cow, they could kill this dragon. This would be awesome. So, but he doesn't kill it. He gets a result on the critical hit table that said broken hand. But it didn't do any extra damage. It just meant the hand was broken, and so and so I ruled that like basically the green dragon showed up, and he got the axe, did a little bit of damage, and then breaks like one of the claws on his hand, hurts him, and he flies away. He's like, there's got to be easier stuff to kill. I can go and like kill like orcs, or basically it was a learning adventure for the dragon. Now later on, I had that dragon come back after he'd grown up a little bit, and he's kind of gotten more. And I'll talk about him, Imran the dragon. I'll talk about him later, and how like he became a huge portion of the world, and how he became very integral to like the players and their plots and everything that was going on. All right, so here's the thing. Here's the big secret of the campaign. So I mean, I can tell you this because there is no, there's no big surprise here. So the whole idea behind this was that, so Vladimir, he wasn't really upset at all about the idea that he was sent to do this. The only thing that upset him is that, like, and basically the one thing that he loved more than anything in the world was his wife, Lady Sarah. And here's the thing about Lady Sarah. Lady Sarah, remember I said that she is beautiful and kind of vapid and young? Lady Sarah was actually the daughter of the king of Astandar, and she watched him being executed on the beach. And she, as a young child, she swore revenge. And so, you know, and everybody thought that she had died, but she had gone into hiding. And she had, so as a young child, so kind of, you know, a little bit, you know, like, and people are going to say, oh, kind of like Arya. Yeah, okay, yeah, a little bit, you know. And somebody actually mentioned that after the campaign, and I was like, you know what, that probably inspired me in some weird way. Arya from Game of Thrones, if you don't know what I'm talking about. That probably inspired me in some weird way, in some backwards. But you gotta remember, the idea for this campaign was after I had read the books, and we weren't that far along in the story. So but regardless, I will fully admit that, you know, if not literally, you know, I probably got an idea from that in some way. And like the old saying says, you know, the greatest artists steal, right? And I like that comment, you know, because it kind of absolves you of blame if you did steal. But anyway, regardless, so the whole point is that they, like, Vladimir and his wife are looking for people that are going to show. They're going to show that they have what it takes, if you will. That are going to be power players. That are going to be doing what needs to be done. So now there's a lot of things that happened as this game. Remember, this campaign lasted almost 3 years. There's a ton of things that happened. And I did a lot of things that basically slowly but surely kind of showed the King of Tresk in a bad light. Or at least I tried to. I tried to basically make him sound like maybe he wasn't the best leader. Maybe he's a little foolhardy. You know, he hadn't taken a queen yet, and everybody was saying that he needed to because of the fact that he was the last in the line of Tresk. And, you know, and so, like, they thought that, but he was being really choosy about finding a wife. You know, and so there was lots of things like that. At one point, like, there was a marvelous moment when the players actually grew in power and actually got to the point where they found an old ruined keep that they then recovered, defeated the demon that was living in it, and decided this will be our home. And so they petitioned the Baron for the right to claim the land around it, and so they had this keep, and they all became lords of this keep. And they had a city that was nearby. It was like, there was basically, like, think of this hill that was overlooking this large lake, and like, of all things, they just named the town Lake Town, was what they named it. And I can't remember the name of the city. They kind of argued a little bit over the name of the city for a while, and they eventually, oh man, it was something like maybe it was Far Hill or something. No, it wasn't Far Hill. Oh man, maybe it was Far Hill. I don't know, but like, yeah, I think it was Far Hill was the name, possibly. We'll run with it. It was Far Hill, and so they became lords of Far Hill, and so they had to, like, you know, like, there was like a very comical moment where like we spent a good, like, 2-3 months of campaign. We met twice a month. A good 2-3 months where the players were getting together basically to be city planners, you know, and that was what we did. And I remember one time Althus, like, because he wasn't the smartest guy in the world, because he's the fighter and he the force of personality and everything like that, he was kind of seen as the leader. and a lot of people referred to the group as Ulthus's Raiders, was what they called them. And so they like at some point, like he was just like, it's like, Althus wasn't made for sitting in boring meetings all day. Althus needs to go out and find a hole with monsters in it and go in there and kills whatever's there. And so I found it kind of funny that like the players had kind of achieved one of their goals. They had become nobles. They were, in fact, rich. They never had to worry about food or money again for the rest of their lives, yet they were incredibly bored and they wanted to go back to being adventurers. So that whole "be careful what you wish for, it might come true" kind of thing. So I thought that was awesome that they were in that kind of a situation. And they didn't know what they wanted to do. But, there was a lot of stuff going on in the city that was actually fun. There was a situation where they found this old monastery to the healer that was, like, in the mountains, like, way far off. And so they didn't know, what was going on there, and so then they talked to the monks and things that were living there, and they were like, "Oh, well, can we come in and see?" And they were just all like, no, you may not come in and see." And they're like, "Well, why not?" The bishop was like, "I'm a bishop of the healer," and he was like, "Yes, but, no, you may not, because you're not part of our, like, group. We worship the healer in a way that you do not worship, and so you can't be here." And so, of course, they were really, really suspicious of him, but everything that they found out about it, they were like, they were trying to sneak in, and what the places within the place that they could sneak into and find, they were definitely, like, it looked like it was up and up. It looked like it was, so they thought maybe they're just really, weird, maybe they're just, like, not... They're not, like, evil. They're just, like, kind of maybe wackadoos in some weird way or whatever. But, of course, they were evil. So, and they eventually, like, had to do battle with them. And they were, like, I had them worshiping some weird demon god kind of thing. And they were actually, like, implanting people within their city of Lake Town. They were, like, turning them into, like, these weird, like, toad human hybrids and stuff like that. So, that was, like, a cool adventure that I grew over time. They just kind of, like, created that over time. The players went to, like, alternate dimensions to investigate different things. They went to they had a recurring villain, and maybe I'll do a video about recurring villains. So, from the very get-go, like, I gave them a map, and I wonder, I don't even know where that map is. I thought it was up there. But regardless, I gave them a map that they were originally given, and one of the things they said on the map was there was all these, like, cryptic things that they didn't know, like the Grimpen Mists, and there was, like, a spot that was called, like, the Unholy Barrows, and the Lair of Blackclaw, and the Tower of the Mad Mage. So I gave them all of these, like, things that looked interesting to go, and and that's the thing. I let the players just go and explore, and see. And what that did was it allowed me to just do whatever, And, like, if I wanted them to find an ancient, decrepit ghoul mound for that session, I could do that. I didn't have to, like, force myself to be like, oh, I need to, like, make sure that it's another Knoll party that's going to lead them to this and lead them to that. No, I could just say, this session, it was kind of like the old, remember watching old X-Files when it was good? Like, there would be, like, episodes that would kind of propel forward the whole Smoking Man, like process, like, that whole, like, conspiracy idea, and it would push that storyline forward. But there was also just episodes that were, like, Monsters of the Week episode. And so I kind of did it like that, where it was like I had, like, just Monsters of the Week things, where it was like, oh, okay, you're gonna investigate. I had my daughter create a dungeon that was like, I said, here's these monster books. you create the crazy dungeon. So basically the idea was that they got sucked into a chaos mage spot, which was a prison that had been created by these gnomes that were created to basically keep these monsters that they had mistakenly summoned within their home. They basically sacrificed their lives so the evil extraplanar creatures that they accidentally summoned couldn't ever bust out. But of course the PCs found it and went in and started mucking about. But what I got to do is I got to tell my daughter, it's like, look, you go ahead, and as long as it's like an extraplanar creature, you can just go ahead and create the craziest dungeon you want. And she did, and she created this really crazy dungeon. And then my daughter and I got to run that together as the players went through it. And that was that was a ton of fun to do, and a ton of fun to share with my daughter as far as that goes. But anyway, so the whole point of this story is to kind of tell you ultimately, like, the idea was that I wanted to put to them this idea that they're going to have to make a choice at the end. So to get to that point and to kind of, to sum up, if you will, and if you're still listening to this after all this time, I greatly appreciate it. I mean, like I said, this campaign was a long, long campaign. I mean, they chased down Blackclaw forever. I mean, when I first had the idea of Blackclaw, I was going to have him be like a Gnoll chieftain. And then I was like, oh, well, they're way too powerful now. If it's like an old chieftain, they'll kill him almost automatically. So then I was like, okay, he's going to be like a lycanthrope. And then I actually made him a jackalware, which is like a really weird lycanthrope that, like, the natural look of them is a jackal, but like they can appear to be like human form as well. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna make him a jackalware. And then I was like, oh no, they're too powerful for that. And then I was like, okay, well then he's gonna be this, then he's gonna be that. And so eventually, when they finally ran into him once, like I described him as being this kind of scruffy looking human. And the idea was still that he might have been human, but then what happened is that just to make him powerful, I actually made him a Rakshasa, which, depending upon which edition you read or whatever, Rakshasas are a type of devil, and they normally appear. They're masters of illusion and trickery and whatever. And so ultimately, it was one of those things where it was like, I kind of made Blackclaw pretty powerful. And he wasn't so much like, he could cast spells and do things, and he could fight pretty well, but he was more the fact that, like, he was just really unkillable. He was just, basically, nobody knew how to defeat him. You could kind of scare him off, and you could kind of waylay him a little bit, but, it was just like, you couldn't hurt him, really. And he was also part of this group, or he was part of this group, which I called, the Lords of Hollowfrost, which was like this total idea I had of all these like super evil people that were going to be behind the scenes, and that idea just got completely scrapped. They ran into the Lords of Hollowfrost once, and then they never saw them again. And I never went back to that. And I was one of those things where it was too much. It was like I was trying to do so much with the campaign, it was just not going to work having like that as part of it. But anyway, regardless. Eventually, they ended up actually kind of working with Blackclaw for a little bit. And there was actually one moment where the reason they went into that gnome city was they had heard that Blackclaw had been there at one point, like millennia ago or thousands of years ago or whatever. And, like, they had found, and they had heard that the gnomes had found a way to defeat him. And so ultimately they found out that, like, he was a Rakshasa, and then you needed this one special crossbow bolt, and, like, to be able to defeat him. And so they actually shot him with the crossbow bolt, but they had forgotten to inscribe his name on the crossbow bolt, and so it didn't actually kill him. That was actually a pretty wonderful moment. And so that actually became, like, a huge part where they really, really wanted to kill Blackclaw. Like, he had screwed them over a few times. And he was kind of an arrogant jerk, real good, like, NPC, but also, like, but he was also, like, it was one of those things where he knew that basically, he's immortal, and so he doesn't really have to worry about the PCs that much. He doesn't have to worry about making them happy or whatever. But you know, he was having fun, you know, talking with them or whatever, and just, you know, kind of messing with them and enjoying being part of their lives and kind of like being a power player. And so what happened is that they really wanted to kill him, and that actually was one of my bits of cheese that I dangled in front of them, that like when I came to the big choice. All right, so the big choice. So what happened is that after like crazy amounts of crazy stuff happening, we're really fast forwarding here towards the end, but one of the things that my players always say is like, oh, yeah, the NPCs being nice to us, so they're either going to be super evil and ultimately be the person behind the whole plan, or they're going to die off and whatever. So there were two heroes, or two NPCs that were always helping the party. There was the Baron Vladimir's court mage by the guy by the name of Brendan Jarl he was always helping the players. Like if they needed any magical research done, he would do it for them. If either of the spellcasters needed, like they wanted to pick up a certain spell, he would write scrolls for them so they could transcribe them into their books. You know, he bent over backwards to help them. The other person was a bishop of the healer, and his name was Brother Dennis. Brother Dennis was an old man, like blind, but still very, very smart, and he made potions. He was always making potions, and he always had potions of healing for the party. Like, they'd come back to him, and he would have, and he actually, for a while, he had his nephew was a cleric, and they actually brought his nephew with him on a couple of adventures, and then he got turned to stone actually on one of the adventures, and they were like, we can't bring this guy along anymore because he's gonna get killed. And they got a stone to flesh scroll or a break enchantment or whatever it was you needed to fix that. But at that point they were like, yeah, we can't do this because Brother Dennis is expecting us to like take care of his nephew, and we almost got him killed. So we need to. They actually ended up burying his stone body in the ground. They were like, well, we can save him right now, and they actually were like, actually, you know, if we actually take him into the den of whatever, they were like fighting some guy that had basilisks as, that's a horrible word, basilisks. But anyway, they made the decision, let's just dig a hole in the ground and put his stone body in it because it's not going to get hurt. And then after we defeat the basilisks, we'll come back here and we'll dig them out, and then we'll turn them back to flesh. I mean, I was like, I give him credit. I mean, it was actually a pretty good idea, and they because one of the things about my campaign world was like there was no resurrection. If you died, you were dead. That was it, you know, and so like it was definitely like, and I think that's something you need to put honestly in most campaigns that people play. I think you need to have that mentality of like, if you die, you are dead. Because otherwise, like, you have situations where people are like, oh, well, you can just go in there, and I guess if I get killed, you can just cast resurrection on me. You know, it's just there isn't any value in being slaughtered, right? Anyway, so there you go. The Brother Dennis was like super, super helpful, and this is kind of skipping a few plot points here, but one of the things is that at one point, eventually his nephew did get killed, but it wasn't the party's fault. They actually like convinced the nephew to like do some research for them or something like that, and so then he went back to. So they actually made a couple of trips back to the king, like the world of Tresk. They left Asendor, got on a boat, went over there. And they actually like convinced like Joshua, that was his name, Joshua, his nephew Joshua. They had him doing research for them, and like trying to figure out, like, I think they're actually researching like the Lords of Hollowfrost or something. I don't know. Who knows? Or probably Blackclaw actually. And somebody killed him, like in the middle of the night. Well, actually, he was reading, and an assassin had broke in and killed him, stabbed him, cut his throat, whatever. And Brother Dennis, he retreated to, like, they were very apologetic to Brother Dennis about what happened, and then Brother Dennis went back to his room, and then he came out looking like a man that was at least 30, 35, 40 years younger than when he went in. And so the Toggle, the gnome, actually asked him, like, why, if you could be like this all the time, why wouldn't you, be young? And he said, well, it's my penance. And so they didn't know what he meant, and he went, of course, in classic D&D lore, like, he wouldn't, expound upon what he meant by penance. But, as it went on, what they found at some point, I forget where, but they found half a tapestry, and the tapestry was actually they realized it was a depiction of the execution of the king of Astandar, and later they saw that the man wielding the executioner's axe looked exactly like a young Brother Dennis, and so there you go. So Brother Dennis was actually the person that actually was tasked with lopping off the head of the king of Astandar, and so that was his penance for taking the king's head. But anyway, so so what happened was ultimately they're tracking down all of these little tiny steps in this way and that way and that way and this way, and so then the big reveal is that they eventually hear that they want to kill Blackclaw. That was like the goal. They were like, we need to get rid of him. He is screwing, because like they thought that he was corrupting Laketown, and he wasn't so much corrupting Laketown, but there was a crazy cleric of the Fates that the party would that would travel with the party from time to time, who had set up a church to the Fates within Laketown. And they thought that Blackclaw was corrupting him, so they wanted to go. And so they heard that the only person that knew Blackclaw's real name, and so they had another crossbow built, and they were gonna try to kill him. And so they heard that the only person that knew Blackclaw's name was the Mad Mage. And so they went to the Mad Mage's tower, and the Mad Mage had done other things. They knew he was a Lord of Hollowfrost. He summoned. He would summon golems that would attack the party from time to time, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he really literally was like the Mad Mage. He would send golems with messages on them that would explode, like letters, things like that. And so they went there, and so they went into the room. They finally they fought their way up to the top of the tower. They get to the Mad Mage, and there's basically this golem with the big giant smile on carved in its face, and they hear this disembodied voice say, "Go into the room next door, and all will be revealed." And so they go into the room next door, and there they see the other half of the tapestry, and they realize it's the other half, and they realize that, and the tapestry actually depicts the girl's daughter watching in hiding the execution of her father, and they realize that it looks like Lady Sarah. And then that's when Brendan Jarl, who is actually the Mad Mage, comes out, and Lady Sarah comes out, and they basically say, so that's now you know what's going on, and they basically say this was they tried to sever our bloodline, they tried to destroy us, and now we need to reestablish ourselves, the Astandarian line, as it, and so they had this big long discussion with Lady Sarah, and Ryan, remember they were under the impression that she was kind of an idiot. And also I should mention that Toggle was in love with her, flat out in love with her. and she played it up, like just constantly just referencing how brave he was and how powerful he was and everything like that. And to Jason's credit, I mean, he played the character and played up the whole situation perfectly. So ultimately, what they said was, it was like, we are going, we have sent word to the king, and the king is here. Like, they basically, they had seen the royal fleet in the bay, and they said, we want you to go, and we want you to kill the king. And because he has no heirs at this point, we can sever the Trescan bloodline. What we can do is we can end that Tristan bloodline, and then she would then become, because then basically it would go, Baron Vladimir would become the king of both, and then their offspring would then be, and then one of the things that she would do is that she would actually, it would be an Astundarian regime, or whatever, and plus then she would get her revenge for her father dying. So now here's the whole point. The whole point was I was trying to get the players to decide at that point who they wanted to side with. And would they be willing to commit regicide if they thought that what they wanted to do, what the bad guys technically wanted to do, was the right thing to do. And they actually debated it. They debated it for about an hour and a half, in real life. They discussed it and discussed it and discussed it, and they couldn't decide. Toggle was all for it. He was just and she even said, perhaps there would be a little hanky-panky going on between her and Toggle, afterwards, or, it's of course, the man who would deliver a kingdom to me would be greatly rewarded, that kind of a thing. And, so, they debated it for a long time, and they honestly, they would have done it, but Brother Dennis had to die as well, because he was the one that executed the king. And they were okay with doing everything else. They were going to have to kill the king. They were going to have to kill the king's magician, who they hated. I forget what his name was, but they didn't like him at all. It was like Xandaz or something like that. They didn't like him at all. They had actually like Grum, the paladin of the hero, was actually killed in an assassination attempt that was directed towards him to be killed, but they made it look like the person that they were trying to kill was the Lady Sarah. And that was actually one of the reasons why they were like, oh, it's just and they thought that maybe the king had tried to kill her for some reason. Yeah, and that was a wonderful session as well. But ultimately what it came down to was they were willing to forgive the whole thing. They were willing to forgive all the lies, all the subterfuge, everything else, as long as she was willing to say, you don't have to kill, leave the, you don't have to kill the Brother Dennis. But her hatred for him, over what he had done, over the fact that he had killed her father, and she had to watch him do it, prevented her from agreeing to that. And looking back, what I should have done is I should have had her say, okay, fine, and then just lie to them. And so then they have them go and kill the king, and then have her and whatever kill Brother Dennis, and kind of leave that oh, are you just gonna now are you going to kill the only people that can rule? And I realized I should have done that, but I kind of wanted the players to feel like heroes, and so they refused to do it, and and they were really beaten down, and so they were like, and one of the things they were arguing about was like, if we say no, they're going to kill us, because they were so they actually they came up with a pretty ingenious way of escaping. They made it out of that area after saying no, and they had a way to call Imran. Remember the Green Dragon? And he actually flew there and flew them out, and because that's a long story, but Imran actually became a member, became a citizen of Farhill, and was like, and had his own, they had a green dragon living within their city. So, but that's like another story entirely. I mean, it's kind of fun how like those stories kind of grow and get created. But so, and then ultimately what it was is that they left. And then they realized that the only way they could stop it is if they actually went and killed King Vladimir, because then they because of the bloodlines or anything like that. So they ended up teleporting into the Citadel to try to kill King Vladimir, and there was a big giant battle, and I mean there's a lot more that happened. He actually got killed, but like they knew they had the ability to bring a person back to life, so they did. And then there was a big huge battle, and ultimately, there were dragons fighting, and there was, necromancers fighting, and the PCs were fighting, the Lady Sarah and all those people, and so they all had this big, huge battle outside of Farhill, and eventually, the party won, and they defeated the bad people, and they, became heroes, and, and that was the end of the campaign, and ultimately, like I've said before, I have a great deal of difficulty finishing off a campaign. Here, actually, let me do this. I'll let you actually look at me for a second. So one of the things is like I have a real problem with finishing off a campaign. I mean, the storyline to get to the point where you actually are into that ending spot is like, it's usually pretty easy to draw. If you have a good group, they help create the story to get to that point. The problem is with like a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows and everything like that, you have this wonderful story that goes for so long that when you get to the end, almost pretty much no matter what you do, isn't going to be good enough to like satisfy like the situation and satisfy that story. And I think I had to kind of just give up on the idea that I could actually have, like, a story that would actually, like, an ending that would satisfy the story. Like, I need to just have, like, a good ending. Like, a satisfying ending. That then would lend itself to, like, people not having a sour feeling about everything that came before. So, like, the entire story to get to there was great, with ups and downs or whatever, but then the ending didn't spoil it, if you will. So they had a huge battle. Toggle ended up having to kill the woman he loved, which was like fantastic. The one paladin that was still alive, because they killed off two of the paladins, because they knew those paladins found out of the warriors three. Two of them found out about what was going on and were investigating it, and one of them was actually in on the overthrow, Justin Brand, and so and they hated him. like they really hated him. So Ulthus got to kill him. He was very pleased with himself when he was able to do that. Like Brendan Jarl ended up like teleporting away. They didn't get to kill him, which was fine. I knew the Man Mage would just get away. Blackclaw had a part in it, actually helped out the players, and he was like one of those things where it's like the Mad Mage was still willing to, because like that was one of the things they offered him. They were like, if you help us, we'll give you the name of Blackclaw. I'll give you his true name, so you'll be able to kill him. And that was like a huge thing. The players were like, yeah, but we still won't be able to kill Blackclaw. And like during the battle, like he offered to give him the name, and they turned it down. Stuff like that. So like it was one of those things where Blackclaw ended up like showing up, and like Brendan Jarl was just devastating them with his golems and like fireballs and whatever, and so Blackclaw showed up and like nearly killed him, and so he had to run away. There was actually a whole thing where there was this red dragon that was always named Arilax, that was always in a situation where like they're like an imminent threat, and he had been used a few times. He was actually the one that killed the Dwarven Paladin, and so there was always like this imminent threat of him. He actually showed up, and he actually wanted to kill Imran, because Imran had the audacity to attack him at some point. But Imran actually brought his mom, so there was this big, huge green dragon and this smaller green dragon fighting this red dragon. And red dragon was still winning, but then there was this black dragon that owed them a favor, and so there's this huge dragon battle at the same time. So, I mean, there was like this huge epic battle at the end, and like thing, and it took the battle itself, and this was a system that, you know, battles wrap up really quick in the system that we use. It's a very, very simple kind of first edition-y type of battle system, but this battle took 2-3 hours. It was like this huge epic battle. So ultimately, the bad guys got, and the good guys came out on top. They became the heroes, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't like it didn't hit the perfect movie moments that people were looking for entirely. I mean, there was like, yes, Toggle ended up having to be the one to kill the woman that he loved. You know, the fighter got to kill the paladin. Rolandus, the elf, you know, got to mete out some justice to there was this assassins guild called the Steel Legion, and he got to mete out some justice to some people of those that like he'd been dealing with. You know, so and Khar, his name was Khar, Khar, the dwarven cleric of the judge. Like, he was like, you know, just basically like, you know, I judge thee guilty, and he was smashing people, you know, with his double hammer, you know, it's a giant two-handed warhammer, and caving in their heads. And so you know, so everybody got a moment to shine, and I had to admit, I think it was like the campaign that ended like the best it possibly could. Yeah, and looking back, the thing about it though is that I really could have shortened the campaign. I mean, it really could have been a campaign that lasted like 6-9 months. And I've started to think about that actually with my next campaign, the next ideas that I'm having. Is like, do I really need to have a nice, long, giant, epic campaign again? And I guess that's kind of something I've been thinking about, and I want to do another video where I take some time like this again, and I'll have to find something else to paint. But I want to be able to talk about like the ideas that I have for my next campaign and where I'm kind of going with it, and what I can do to maybe not make it, you know, like somebody once said my campaigns are Wagner-esque, and I didn't really know what he meant, but then somebody told me that Wagner, the conductor or the creator or whatever, the orchestral music conductor, creator, writer, whatever, I can't even think of the word I'm looking for. He made everything long, like longer than it needed to be, and not that it necessarily was bad. It was just really, really long, and so it was one of those things where, you know, like with my next idea. It feels like it has to be something epic, but maybe it's something I can condense. But anyway, that's another time, another story, another video. If you watch this or listen to this, I don't know why you'd watch it, or if you like enjoyed me like painting a bunch of little ghouls gray, I don't know why you'd enjoy watching that. But if you listen to this and you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. Go ahead and mention away. If you want to steal any of these ideas that I had and apply them to your own campaigns, have at it. I don't really care. If you publish it and make like millions of dollars, please send me a check. Anyway, but thank you very much for taking a listen to this. Like I said, make comments, suggestions, whatever. And yeah, I'll probably end up doing another one of these relatively soon. All right, until next time, Undead Viking, out.